Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here. I recognize you. I saw your picture in the newspapers. You, chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits. And then you blew your brains out.
That's strange, sir. I don't have any recollection of that at all.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir. But you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here.
He's always been the caretaker. Always. And that is a masterpiece. That is Stanley Kubrick's film, The Shining, based on Stephen King's best-selling novel. But make no mistake, it's a film, not the book. And that's what we'll be talking about. This is Will. This is Horror of It All Guy. This is Horror Guy tonight. And this is probably one of the most fascinating things I can think of when it comes to just Stanley Kubrick in general. And certainly The Shining, since it has to do with both men, Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King. Now let's get down to the ghostly with the mostly, the ghost of the most, and to say how much I enjoy The Shining, how much it is one of my favorite films of all time. Favorite supernatural, ghost story, horror movie, we can keep going, even mystery, because there's a, as you know, if you've seen it, there's a huge mystery. There's an enigma and a puzzle and a riddle throughout. So, quantify it and categorize it any way you'd want. But for me, I'd say, 2001: A Space Odyssey and then The Shining are two of his true masterworks. Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, we can go on and on. But in terms of supernatural, because it was the only supernatural horror movie that Stanley Kubrick tackled. And this Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick sort of confrontation and exchange of ideas, clash, what have you, I remember hearing about years ago and being fascinated because it was this director, one of the most respected in Hollywood in history, talking to one of the most respected and successful novelists of all time, Stephen King. And so, these two icons, these two juggernauts of pop culture, of entertainment, what transpired between the two. Now, it's said that Stephen King over the years has told several versions. They're all pretty much the same, I guess, in variations and varying small details. But the crux and the core is that Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King discussed ghosts, the afterlife, and yes, even hell. So now fans of Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick, fans of the novel and the movie, should know by this time, since the movie was released in 1980, the novel in 1977, that there are great variations. In fact, in many ways, Stanley Kubrick took that novel, took King's work, and changed, some would say drastically, the core story. He co-wrote it, Kubrick, with novelist Diane Johnson. And, again, you can criticize or say, he should not have changed the story. But what we got ultimately is something that both fans, I think, of the novel and the movie can sort of reconcile and appreciate. Though there are some purists, hardcore Stephen King fans of the novel, that say Kubrick was sacrilegious, that he should not have changed the text. Some quick interesting stats: The Shining was released in 1980. And there are three versions. I didn't know this. The premiere version, I guess the theatrical, was 146 minutes. Then the American subsequent, I guess that was just the premiere maybe. Then the subsequent American version is 144 minutes, so 2 minutes less. And then the European version is even shorter. That's 119 minutes. So I don't know if any. I know years ago I had the DVD. I have the digital. I've never really looked at the running time, but there are three versions. Box office did very well. The budget was $19 million, and the box office was $47.3 million. Starring, of course, Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd. And this is from the official wiki. Production took place almost exclusively at EMI Elstree Studios, with sets based on real locations. Kubrick often worked with a small crew, which allowed him to do many takes, sometimes to the exhaustion of the actors and the staff. Now, at the time, the Steadicam had just come out, and it's really interesting to see those first sort of Steadicam shots. The new Steadicam mount was used to shoot several scenes, giving the film an innovative and immersive look and feel. There has been much speculation about the meanings and actions in the film because of inconsistencies, ambiguities, symbolism, and differences from the book. And again, there's actually a documentary. Name escapes me. Was it maybe The Room? The Room where the weird, of course, the zombie demon ghost woman was. Bottom line is, you're talking about these sort of conspiracy theories that Kubrick layered in, all these sort of in-jokes and, secrets. In fact, there's that whole contingent of people that say Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landing and it was all a hoax, but we could do another whole podcast of that. My buddy would definitely want to come on and talk about it because I know how much he knows. But the Steadicam footage for that time still looks amazing, and I find myself, when I watch the film, always sort of lingering and sort of looking at that sort of lavish feel, especially when the son is going around, in his little big wheel. So when Danny, Doc, is riding his big wheel, and you see it, from that Steadicam perspective, it's really cool. The Shining was ranked the 75th greatest film of all time. This was in 2012 by Sight and Sound Directors Poll. 75th greatest film of all time, not just horror, ghost story, scary film, of all time, just of any film. 75. And then in 2018, the film was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And then 39 years later, a sequel, Dr. Sleep, was released in 2019, which I saw about, 15 minutes of the beginning. It began pretty well. I never went back, so maybe I'll go back and finally watch the whole thing. All right, the core topic of our podcast tonight, though, is what happened between King and Kubrick. This is from the Horror Obsessive site. Quote, according to King, when Kubrick called him to ask about adapting The Shining, he told King that he considered ghost stories fundamentally optimistic because they suggest the existence of life after death. To this, King replied, what about hell? And Kubrick responded only with, I don't believe in hell. And again, there's certain variations and versions that King or maybe other people have told over the years. But basically, Kubrick was saying, I guess, that he was an atheist, that he didn't believe in God or hell or what have you. And so it didn't really, register and compute with him. And this is from Far Out, the website Far Out. During the production process, King and Kubrick naturally had to come in contact with each other, and even discussed various topics over the phone. King once revealed that the celebrated filmmaker tried to explain why he did not want to make a ghost story, claiming that such narrative were facile and optimistic because they implied the hopeful continuation of our existence beyond the void of death as ghosts. King tried to counter Kubrick's arguments by asking him whether he considered the domain of hell to be optimistic, to which the director replied, "I don't believe in hell." There's another confirmation of that segment of their chat. And finally, this wasn't the only interesting conversation that the two artistic giants engaged in. Kubrick was so frustrated by King's inability to understand his cynical view of humanity that he called the writer late at night, only to ask him, "Do you believe in God?" Although Stephen King has stated 3 different versions of what happened next in different interviews, the most popular one involves Kubrick exclaiming, "I knew it," and immediately hanging up. So right, that's, again, I think I've actually seen one interview or read it with King, and he kind of, deviates, or certainly, in terms of memory, was a little bit muddled. But there you have it. I mean, 2 of the greats of pop culture, entertainment, literature, and cinema, and how they sort of clashed and or complemented each other, because obviously there wouldn't be a Stanley Kubrick Shining without Stephen King's novel. And I've read the novel, it's great, and I've seen the TV miniseries with Steven Weber and Rebecca De Mornay. And again, very well done, but different. Different vibe, lots of different scenes, especially at the end. And I recommend, watching them both. I would imagine by now you've seen Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, though, because it is truly one of the classics. Now you know just what interesting behind the scenes there was between Kubrick and King. I want to thank you guys for listening, as usual. Hope you subscribe. If not, do so. It's free. It's always free. You can do the paid people, though, as well, $4.99. And come on and get some exclusives, some goodies that the free people do not. Either or, we love to hear your comments, your feedback. Keep on listening and keep on watching scary movies, because it is the season, and go watch The Shining. You will love it if you have not watched.